there's two things here. The first is that this keyboard that I've designed would not have worked in a typewriter world.
Yeah.
Without software present, you cannot design this kind of keyboard.
Yeah.
तो उसमें तो ये होता था टाइपराइटर दुनिया में कि आपको स्वाद लिखना है ना, तो आपको बताना पड़ता था कि मैं स्वाद का जुड़ा हुआ हिस्सा लिख रहा हूँ कि मैं फुल स्वाद लिख रहा हूँ या एंड वाला हिस्सा लिख रहा हूँ. Those were all have different buttons, right? And so when we got computer world, हमने कहा स्वाद का एक बटन, and then the computer will figure out what shape to give it depending on where it shows up in the word. And now with the smartphone and touch screens, we can do an extra step, which is that we can take lossier input and guess what word you are trying to type. So in this case, I say, just give me the shape of the letter you want to type.
Yeah.
And the reason I'm doing that is because it's easier to type it. और उसके बाद I can guess कि आपने नुक्ते क्या डालने हैं. And for the most part, that is right. And the reason that's right is because we built a custom kind of Urdu data set based on lots of like type Urdu that we have then increased the quality of, and then we learn from that, and then we start guessing what it is that you want to type. So say for example, आपने लिखना है का या ga, both very common words. And so we have to guess when you're doing that based on what else you've typed. And so we can make those guesses in an educated fashion. And sometimes they'll be wrong, just as all autocorrect can sometimes, and all AI can sometimes be wrong, in which cases there are fail-safes, like you can manually type it and so forth. But for the most part, it should guess. And so in a pre-smartphone era, this was not possible. आप कर ही नहीं सकते थे. In a pre-sort of software-based era. So if there was no software in typing, you could never do this. So that's the kind of main idea. The interesting thing here is, agar Chinese में देखें, in Chinese, Japanese, all these East Asian languages that have tons of letters or tons of characters that they want to type that cannot fit on a keyboard, they have never imagined typing without software.
Yes.
There was always, right? मतलब उन्होंने तो सोचा 60s से वो कह रहे हैं कि typing हो ही नहीं सकती software के बगैर. So we will actually give some sort of lossy input, and the computer will help us select what character we are going to type. Latin script में ये problem था नहीं, तो उधर उन्होंने software नहीं डाला typing का. कई साल typewriter चलता गया. That same paradigm shifted to computers with some autocorrect and grammar correction, but the main paradigm was similar. What we did wrong in the Arabic script world and in the Urdu world is that we attached ourselves to that Latin script as opposed to the Chinese idea, because there's, for various reasons, but the idea we took was कि अच्छा ये Latin paradigm पकड़ के आगे चलते हैं, when in fact the software enabled paradigms actually allow us to do lots of really interesting things, which we could never have done before. So that's sort of one angle. So you're right that the software is the key. The second thing to understand is that in a smartphone world, the software is key, period. The reason that is even on a standard English keyboard, the keys are too small to hit reliably.
Right.
Like if you look at it from a kind of user interface angle, the main tap targets that we gave, like for fat fingers, like if you're using a thumb, the weight, you can't hit those keys accurately at scale.
Right.
If you're typing like thousands of letters. And so the way that the iPhone keyboard originally worked, and people may remember this, when the iPhone keyboard came out, people were all like, BlackBerry ka keyboard ke bagair nahi hum reh sakte. You must have a hardware keyboard. And the whole way that they made it work is that the tap targets of the keys were not what you see. They would guess what letter you were going to type based on what letter was likely to appear. So aapne T or H likha hai, then they know that the E is the likeliest letter you're going to type. So as long as you type around the E, they knew that's what you were
There was
typing.
like I think in video games it's called like a hitbox, where it's not like you're not exactly in that area, but close enough. वो active frames ko count karke, it'll help you sort of. Yeah.
And this shipped with the very first iPhone in 2007. Urdu mein abhi tak nahi hai usme. I mean, so they added like more and more versions, like predictive, and so you could see what it was thinking a little bit more later. But this idea that there was some autocorrect functionality built into the keyboard shipped in 2007. Urdu mein, because at least the iPhone doesn't understand Urdu very much. It knows some words that you typed before, but not really. That level of knowledge didn't come through, which means that typing on the keyboard with the same size of buttons is actually physically harder.
Right.
So it's not some myth that people find it harder to type in Urdu. It's actually physically more difficult to do so. Yeah. So without that underlying software layer, this whole transition to smartphones is impossible. So yeah, it's critical. Like आप सोच नहीं सकते like बनाने का बगैर पीछे एक autocorrect या data set.